When an 18th century mirror went missing from a police warehouse in France, the first task of law enforcement was not to find it. At their insistence, many newspapers warned lovers of antiquity, in no case should you buy a mirror with the inscription Louis Arpo, 1743 on the frame. The fact is that 38 owners of this relic died in turn under unclear circumstances. The piquancy to our story is added by the fact that this happened not at the end of the 18th century, but in 1997. By the time of the disappearance, the criminal had already served a rather impressive term. The mirror had been stored in a warehouse since 1910, when the death of two people was directly related to its malicious activity. And the culprit was taken into custody. A wealthy couple accidentally bought a family mirror and almost immediately lost sleep, or rather, acquired debilitating nightmares along with antiques. Both constantly dreamt of fire engulfing the body, and a terrible death in a raging flame. When the poor fellows guessed to ask the former mistress, it turned out that her brother died by knocking over a kerosene lamp, and the tragedy occurred in the room where the mirror of memory hung. It was forbidden to look at him during menstruation, pregnancy, and after childbirth, those who were unwell or even just upset. After all, in any stressful situation or during illness, the activity of the body is activated, which means that its emotional and biophysical radiations become more intense and therefore easier to remember in the mirror. They are remembered in order to return later to us or to someone else. No wonder Ivan the Terrible, with his inherent maximalism, demanded that only blind craftsmen make mirrors for the queen. This is how he protected his wife from the evil eye and damage. There must have been many beautiful fantasies in Professor Moody's head. Otherwise, why would an authoritative scientist undertake to call the spirits of the dead with the help of a mirror? However, this is exactly what he did, first turning the attic of his old mill into a laboratory. He closed the windows with thick shutters, hung them with dark curtains, brought a large mirror and hung it on one of the walls, at such a distance from the floor that the person sitting in front of him could not see his reflection. The wall behind the experimenter was draped with light-absorbing velvet fabric, and the vision chamber itself was immersed in semi-darkness. Dr. Moody treated the experiment conscientiously. Participants were selected mentally and emotionally stable, adults able to clearly express their thoughts. As a rule, the main component in our attitude towards a departed relative is a feeling of guilt. They did not love him, were not too attentive and caring, or even turned out to be an involuntary cause of his death. A session of mirror therapy easily relieves stress and relieves the unfortunate patient of a corroding longing. After all, as we remember, visitors from the looking glass are calm, satisfied. Do not hold a grudge against anyone and still love us, if not more. And yet where do they go and why do they come to us? Scientists say that all of this is located in the right hemisphere of our brain. It guides all creativity and provides intuitive understanding. Perhaps this is also the kind of receiver of images that we receive from the information field of the universe. Unfortunately, this amazing hemisphere is mostly in a kind of half-sleep and only wakes up when human consciousness somehow enters an altered state. That's what a mirror does. In addition, it turns out to be a kind of screen onto which images perceived by the brain from the outside are projected. These properties of a mirror, an amazing conductor between worlds, have long been suspected by our ancestors, about which they left a lot of evidence. Some people look into mirrors or vessels filled with water. They look until they start seeing images. The contemplated object disappears, and then a veil similar to a fog is stretched between the observer and the mirror. Against this background, images are drawn that he is able to perceive, and then describes what he saw. In this state, the soothsayer sees not with ordinary vision, but with the soul. Don't you think we are listening to the minutes of the Raymond Moody meeting? But these words belong to the Arab writer Ibn Khaldun and were written down by him in the 13th century. However, Dr. Moody's predecessors did not seek out encounters with the dead. The feeling of helplessness in the face of the present and the fear of the unknown, this is what drove the famous soothsayers. Remember the Mirror of Galadriel from the recent hit about the Lord of the Rings. It both predicted and warned, showing images of the future. They say that Nostradamus could not do without such a toy. Somehow, in the archives of the castle of Châteauneuf-Fort, among the papers of a certain François Crozet, close to Catherine de' Medici, a record was found about Nostradamus's visit to the royal castle of Chaumont, and the fate of the queen was retold in it. Memoirs made by her in 1587. The queen mentioned only its fragments to a rotating mirror in which vague, changing images rose, and some kind of moving wheels. Each rotation of the mirror corresponded to a year. The session took place in the dark. Only years later, when the mysterious pictures shared by the mirror machine with the queen became a fait accompli, Catherine de' Medici deciphered them: the death of Mary Stuart, Bartholomew's Night, the death of Henry III, the accession of Henry IV. Given the abilities that modern scientists recognize behind a mirror, we are perhaps not too surprised by the intricate apparatus of Nostradamus. Although he was indeed ahead of his time, he learned to consciously draw information from where it is, only at his own discretion. And in Japan you never see a mirror in an antique shop. It cannot be bought or sold there. You will not be sold a mirror for the reason that the soul of the owner may remain in it. And for the same reason, no one in Japan will express a desire to purchase a mirror, because there is a belief that through this mirror the former owner can harm the new owner. A lot of beliefs and prejudices are concentrated in the mirror. It is the mirror that is the object thanks to which Japanese writers so famously twist their plots. The history of the existence of mirrors, known in Japan, is rooted in antiquity. There is information about the first mirrors brought to the archipelago in the 2nd or 1st centuries BC. They were brought from the Korean peninsula and from China. These items were round, made of bronze. Later, the Japanese themselves learned to cast such mirrors. The surface, which had a somewhat convex shape, reflected a fairly wide panorama. On the reverse side there was a knob with a small hole through which a cord was threaded for hanging. Many mirrors were found in the graves, because the Japanese believed that a mirror could light the way in the land of the dead. Serious protection against surprises was such a tool as putting a mirror in your bosom before a fight. Spells were written on them in the form of inscriptions. In Japan, it was believed that a deity moves into a mirror if it is called there by special ritual actions. The circle of all nations is considered a symbol of eternity. In Japan, even tortillas, a traditional Japanese dish made from mochi rice flour, are called mirrors. These cakes were called mirror cake. Thus, the festivity and holiness of this food was emphasized. Gradually, the mirror turned from an exclusively magical object into an everyday one. However, no one cancelled the magical properties of the mirror. From 1603 to 1867, during the so-called Edo period, mirrors began to spread in the countryside. In Japan, there is even such a famous play when a husband brings a mirror to his wife as a gift. She, looking at him and seeing her own reflection, takes this for her husband's mistress and becomes furious, breaking the mirror. This effect of unrecognizability was very popular and played up in every possible way in legends, fairy tales, and various folk tales. By that time, bronze mirrors had already begun to be covered with mercury amalgam, which contributed to a clearer reflection. And, besides, such mirrors had to be more carefully looked after. They were overwritten and repaired, quickly wearing out the top layer. For the restoration of mirrors, pomegranate juice and plum vinegar were used as solvents, and then a new layer was applied to the already cleaned surface. This procedure is performed only by professionals. Only in Edo, modern Tokyo, about 2,000 people were engaged in the restoration of mirrors. Then the mirrors began to appear on the stand. Such attributes were considered necessary in preparation for the wedding for the bride. They were part of her dowry. The family coat of arms was depicted in the mirror so that the bride would not forget over the years to whose tribe she belongs. Well, due to the fact that mirrors were mainly used by women, This item began to be considered the receptacle of a female deity. Pregnant women applied it to their stomachs in the hope that it would have a magical effect and facilitate childbirth. Many mystical properties were attributed to ancient mirrors, and therefore in Japan it was believed that to spoil the mirror meant to bring misfortune. However, this belief exists not only in Japan. The Japanese have always reverently surrounded the mirror in their home. However, to the end to subjugate the absurd nature of the mirror is beyond the power, and probably not a single magician